Welcome to Global Viewpoint, an innovation accelerator brought to you by Hunter Muller, founder and CEO of HMG Strategy.
Hello and welcome to the Global Viewpoint. I'm Hunter Muller, founder and CEO of HMG Strategy. Excited to be here with you today. Good afternoon on the East Coast and good morning on the West Coast. We're here with John Napoli. John is an amazing executive in our industry with an incredible background and has just written a new book on AI, enterprise AI. And John, great to have you on Global Viewpoint today. Just at a top level, please introduce yourself to our audience, and then maybe a few words on the inspiration regarding the new book.
Thanks for having me, Hunter. Really appreciate it. So John Napoli, I've been in kind of financial services technology for the last 28 years at size and scale. So I've had a couple of really fun roles, such as COO overall of technology for JP Morgan Chase, which was great. 17 billion in tech spend, 60,000 people. And I most recently spent the last 2 years at Guardian Life, where I was their chief transformation AI officer. I've since, to Hunter's point, wrote a book and published it kind of March 1st around how to roll out AI for the enterprise. And a lot of that, the motivation for that was really, I just had a lot of people asking me, okay, how do we go about this? I know you've done it a couple times now. What does good look like? And so now I'm founder and CEO of a company called Mission Labs.ai, which is taking those ideas and actually helping them roll out in different clients, and just in really pragmatic ways. And I know we're going to get into it in some detail today.
When you talk about this idea of an AI factory, for people that haven't read the book, what is an AI factory?
Yeah, well, so when I think about kind of AI, I mean, the reality is we all really need to have an AI strategy, whether that's for our organizations and for personally, as individuals. I mean, it's obviously a huge industry. I think we're going to spend about $3 trillion between now and 2027. So it's not really anything we could ignore. When I think about an AI factory itself, it's really just kind of an AI in a box. And so when you think kind of end to end, what are all the pieces I need to put in place as a business owner or a technology leader or a data leader to kind of manage this? And so I kind of have 8 different pillars I look at. And so the first is intake prioritization and value tracking. So ultimately we're doing this, for what are the actual outcomes, not because we really care about AI itself. It's really a tool to get there. Second, the capabilities and platforms. So there are a lot of new things that are happening and kind of surfacing as part of, especially Gen AI. AI has obviously been around since the 50s. Having a strong data foundation, the ongoing operating model, governance, and delivery. So these are things, this will live in perpetuity. Some organizations are really kind of AI, is at their DNA and kind of core, but some places are new. So how do you really manage that? And how do you integrate that to a new organization? Security, legal, risk, and compliance. So this creates, Gen AI especially is creating some new challenges for us and just the ramp up and usage of AI. Digital ethics, just because we do something, should we do something? So how do we think about that as an organization? And then the last 2, kind of talent and culture. And so this is a big change for a lot of organizations and, time permitting, we'll go into some of these things. And lastly, communication and change management. So for me, I view AI more as a change management problem than a technology problem. There are definitely technology aspects. You can go very deep into, gradient descent and some other, different things you can do. But this is more, thinking about how do you as an organization change to adopt AI and get all the benefits that you can from it. So
That's interesting, John. When you think about what McKinsey says, like 70 to 80% of all digital transformational initiatives fail. When you think about why regarding AI, that it's a change management issue, talk to us about that idea.
Yeah, so for me, it's really about, and that's what kind of the whole kind of factory is about. It's like, how do you actually kind of slow down and speed up? So when I think about, okay, what are we trying to achieve? What we're trying to achieve is better outcomes, whether that's increasing growth or increasing revenue, whether that's decreasing costs in some way or getting efficiencies or better managing risk. And so when you think about that, that is something that affects everybody in all parts of the business. So if you look back to a lot of the big technology changes that have happened in recent years, cloud's a really big one. But what's interesting about cloud is it has some parallels to this. But what was interesting about the cloud one is it really more impacted the technologists. But you had this whole, let's say, in my last place of the 60,000 technologists, we had maybe 35,000 engineers. Those engineers had to figure out how to kind of move from okay, I'm coding something on-prem to actually coding something in the cloud and becoming cloud native. And so we went through years of actually training these people. And so now for the vast majority of individuals who are building code, they can build something on AWS or Azure or GCP without even thinking about it. The difference between this is this now AI is actually impacting the businesses themselves. And so the way we do everything is going to change. And you can actually, you can get your hands through SaaS, through some of these tools that are out there like Copilot immediately, and you don't even need technology as part of that equation. And so when I think about productivity over the years, whether it was electronification, whether it was a steam engine, it took 30 years for productivity to really get, to really get the full benefit of productivity. Now, I think it's going to be a lot faster with Gen AI. But what you did see in those kind of, past trends, you would have to change the entire kind of plant and the management floor, really the manufacturing floor to take advantage. So it's going to be the same here. So you have to think about how do you walk through first the technologists and kind of like the core people who are kind of hardcore working on AI projects. You then have to kind of think about the broader organization who are kind of the secondary adopters. And you have to think about every single part of your business, how that's going to impact it. And just leaving that to chance is not the right answer. You should be very methodical, asking the right questions about, okay, what are some of the things we need to do? How are these places going to be impacted? So,
I love the answer, and I love the thoughtfulness of your, detailed. And by the way, preparing for this interview too as well. You kind of blew me away, John. Thank you for that. There's a reason why our company HMG is called HMG Strategy. So I want to go up a level, and you think about strategically how to engage with the C-suite, the line of business, and the CEO, because the CEO is saying, okay, what's our AI strategy? How do we begin that talk with the C-suite and talk us through that life cycle? Because that's really where it should start, right?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot within that. I think the biggest thing for the biggest thing for the C-suite and for the board really is to keep them involved in the conversation and really have them, a core part of it. A lot of it is education, so a lot of it is them understanding exactly what does AI mean, what does it not mean, where there are use cases that are great for thing for Gen AI and use cases that are just poor for it. I come back to, first and foremost, always the business itself and understanding a little bit, okay, what type of company do we want to be as, a CEO or board? Do we want to be AI accelerated or do we want to be kind of what I would call kind of AI steady? And so these AI accelerated organizations, like they're really ambitious and they're out there kind of, really trying to transform through AI. And so I look back at kind of when I was at JP Morgan Chase. I mean, we started the journey in AI very seriously in 2018. We hired away an individual from Google Cloud who was building out all of their kind of product offerings on GCP. And by the time I left in 2023, I mean, we had 900 data scientists, we had 600, machine learning engineers, we had about 200 AI researchers. And so as an independent company that called Evident AI, they actually analyzed, the banking industry, and we were number one because of that. So that's a competitive advantage. And so you think of those who have read, books like Flash Boys, that's a big difference. And so then you have these kind of AI steady companies, and they're like, look, they're not going to be necessarily looking to differentiate through AI. It's going to be a core thing where they're going to find some cost cutting out of it. They might get better cross sell, upsell, but they're going to move a little bit slower, and that's okay too. So even in the last organization I was at, which is a Fortune 250 insurance company, very strong kind of data scientists and kind of, data driven. And we had within 6 months of me standing up kind of the new AI practice, had about 100 use cases with about $200 million in benefit to it, which was different than the 1.7 billion I had kind of at JP, but it's different. So I think first is just kind of sitting with these leaders and saying, what type of company do we want to be? How do we want to go about it? Second is that education piece to kind of as much as possible share with them what's happening in the market and ways to benefit. And I think the third is having this structure in place so they can on an ongoing basis look and say, here is a pipeline of things we're working on that include AI. By the way, I don't talk about AI projects. I talk about transformations of projects that include AI. And then where are we within that process? And then as part of that, going back to kind of the 8 pillars, are we building out kind of capabilities and platforms that are consistent, or is everybody kind of doing their own thing? Do we have the right governance in place? How do we think about the talent of the future? So it is kind of that giving them the full kind of view on all different pieces on a regular basis.
Hey, John, back to you focusing on their transformational projects, right, in a portfolio enabled by AI. Language matters. The lexicon matters. Talk to us about the lexicon, the language to impact and affect maximum accelerated buy-in and change.
Yeah, so for me, it's really about the a couple of things I like. One is, to your point, being very specific about the types of change you're going through. So I tend to bucket things in four buckets. One, I have what I would call big transformational ideas, which is like, totally changing the way a business runs. So if you have like an RFP as part of your process, do we need an RFP or can we do some kind of pre-approval or something? And that typically involves like people change, huge process change, and is much more kind of really thinking big ideas. The second type I like to focus on is what I would call kind of targeted. And so that's where like traditional, more machine learning models would fit in, as with some specific, Gen AI stuff. So as an example, if you look at propensity to close models or like likelihood to buy models. And so, all right, I can kind of apply to my CRM a model and say, go after these people first because they're more likely to buy than others. You might have in that targeted place, okay, well, if I do have to do an RFP, maybe I could fill out the RFP 90% with Gen AI, and I don't have to, do it all manually every single time, like completely different. The third bucket I would say is more automation. And so you'll see a lot of organizations, and I alluded to it before, who are really looking to kind of cut costs and figure out how do we take what we're doing and make it a little more, effective. And so that's where what I recommend in that camp is you work really close with your finance organization. This is really a team effort. It's not just kind of tech. And say, okay, let's follow the money. Like, where are we spending all of our money? Where are all the bodies at? And that doesn't necessarily mean getting rid of bodies, but that can be making them more effective. And from there, you then automate. And there's a lot of really cool AI tools that are out there. Not to name some. You can build your own kind of, I would say, low code solutions that are out there to do automation. More traditional approaches are things like low code workflow or robotics, or RPA in that automation space. And then, of course, there's always enterprise technology. And then the last bucket I always look at is what I call AI integrated. And AI integrated, every single vendor that's out there now is going to incorporate AI into their solution. So I forget the number. I think it's like 85% by 2026 will have deep AI embedded into their solution. By the way, there's already a ton of AI in a lot of these solutions. A lot of it is a little more kind of hidden, but now people are being asked to be a lot more explicit about where they're using AI. And so in those cases, the easy example is Copilot. So if I'm paying $30 a month for Copilot per user, and I'm sorry, for Microsoft Office 365 per user, and they say, hey, it's going to cost you another $35 incremental for Copilot, apply that to every single solution you have. Okay, ServiceNow, Workday, Oracle Financial, you're going to run out of money pretty quickly. So trying to understand where you're using AI, where you're not using AI, where you have to pay extra for, it's important. And then even in that last kind of camp, you have to change a lot of your processes to adhere to kind of manage that. So anytime you use a third party, typically organizations have third party oversight or vendor management at least, but usually some kind of risk management associated with that. You have to start asking different questions. You have to start saying, okay, are you using models? Whose models are you using? What data are you using? You have to talk to legal. You have to say to legal, like, okay, if we have signed a contract with this provider, do you have indemnifications you're putting in place in case what they're using has IP, it was trained on the internet in general, and there might be some IP issues. So it's a really, it really impacts a lot of different stuff just around those four different types of buckets. But all those four buckets still fall into a portfolio, which is, in my opinion, looking at which is looking at kind of growth, cutting cost, or better managing risk. And then implicit in that is the concepts of kind of customer experience and employee experience. But I kind of put those in those camps.
Very good stuff, John.
Long answer to your question, but I'm trying to squeeze a lot into 30 minutes here. So.
No, this is awesome. Hey, John, all of a sudden everyone's an AI expert, right? So I was out in the Valley. Fortunately, at HMG, we were early with MoveWorks. Like, great client. I invested early, had a great exit. I'm sorry, just a couple of weeks ago when ServiceNow acquired Bobin's company, MoveWorks. How do you dial into what's real and what's washing? What's AI washing all about?
Yeah, like I don't really, it's really hard for people to deal with this. I mean, right now, I think there's over about 10,000 AI startups right now, or at least at the end of 2024, for just the top 10 countries that are leading in AI. So it's probably significantly more than 10,000. So how do you really deal with that? And if you think about the landscape, I mean, it's pretty complex. You have all these verticalized solutions out there. So you have like Jasper for marketing or Harvey for legal. You have like obviously Copilot out there, whether that's for software development with GitHub or all the Microsoft stuff for Office 365. You got a whole list of different kind of foundational models from AI 21 to the Anthropic to Cohere to Google to Meta to now you got DeepSeek and the implications of that. You got all these different model hubs. You got or gardens, whatever we're going to call them, from Hugging Face to Bedrock. You got cloud service providers who are selling you stuff like Amazon, GCP, and Azure. You got system integrators who are selling you hard. You got hardware providers like NVIDIA saying you got to buy our stuff. And then you got all these new technologies that are out there that are just becoming more popular. So a good example is vector databases. So you have most of the platforms now, you're starting to see huge, focus on things like vector databases. You're seeing organizations build out kind of prompt databases. And so if you look even at just the vector space, I think it was in 2023 is about $1.6 billion in spend. This year, by 2028, I think it's going to grow to about 4.3 billion. So you're talking about a 24% CAGR in just that one space. Just a ton of change. And so for me, the reason I talk about kind of being a factory or being robotic and kind of slowing down to speed up, it's about being thoughtful about these decisions. So as an example, when you look at all those things in the stack I talk about, it's a decision where you should have the business and technology sitting in a room and saying, just like any kind of technology kind of landscape, to say, all right, what's going to be our company solution for chatbots, right? And so you have at least monthly, you all get together and say, okay, here's our solution, not to call it anything specific. And then somebody says, oh, I want to use this other one. It's so much better. That's when you come back to this committee and you say, hey, we already have one. Is there an incremental reason to do something new? Or should we just kind of stick with this and kind of work with them? So that structure is really important. I also, as part of this factory, love having what I would call like an integrated or a single intake, because people are going to come to you and say, this is an AI problem, this is an AI problem, solve it with AI. You really want people coming to you with business problems, and then you want to be able to solve it the way you think is best appropriate. So having that single intake does that. So when you say, hey, I have a problem, and you might say, you know what, we can fix that by just changing the process. We don't even need technology. Or we could fix that through traditional automation or through, our RPA, or you know what, this one really would benefit from AI. Because most solutions aren't really just AI. AI is usually part of the problem. So when you look at like a Google or an Amazon or some of these other companies that are more AI kind of in their DNA, they're solving the problem and they go, oh yeah, for this part I'll use a model. It makes a lot of sense. But for these other things, I need a really cool, UI that's interacting with the client, or I need automation that's kind of, pulling data and preparing data for me in the right way. So
Great stuff, John. I'd like to open it up to a question or two from our audience. Dora, please go to the speaker, to the gallery view. Folks, any questions for John? Got a really fascinating executive, amazing experience. I see Cindy there, Joe, Avi.
the harder the
I'll ask
question,
him.
the better.
Sharon.
Yeah.
Hey, John,
Sharon's
how
up.
you doing? So, you raised this sort of from the cost perspective, but I'm curious how you're thinking about agentic architecture and, the concept of a more horizontal platform, because agents don't have the learning curve people do, or don't have I should say, learning limitations, maybe people do. So they can be subject matter experts in many things, not just one. And so, is it this architecture of, inheriting the legacy of every SaaS platform's, an SME in a certain area of our business, or is it this more horizontal play, or are you still in wait and see mode and a lot of experimentation?
So the whole great question. So the whole agentic AI thing is really exciting and kind of cool, right? And so I'm a big believer it's going to change the way we interact with technology overall. Like whether that's happening now or happens, like 5 years from now, we'll kind of see. But I'll give you a simple example. I don't want to say its name, but Amazon Echo, I guess, is the kind of thing you can say is sitting next to me. And whereas I used to actively go to websites and kind of buy stuff. I go to Amazon and say, hey, I need to buy like, chewing gum. Now my Echo actually will say to me, like once every few months, I chew a lot of gum for whatever reason. It'll say, hey, like I found out that there's a 25% discount on the thing you're always buying. Do you want to buy it? And what that does is what you're starting to see is this kind of change in approach where we're actively going out and kind of like going to a website and searching for stuff where you have agents that are going to very much like come to you. And that channel might be, might be voice, it might be, video, it might be kind of something more traditional like chat or an email. It's going to kind of figure that out. Now, in terms of the infrastructure, there is a ton of money being spent on agentic infrastructure right now. I think eventually it'll, like anything, it'll all kind of consolidate. There'll be winners and losers, but you can see the full stack from all the way from, like anything, kind of I would say the underlying, like, okay, the tool, like the CI/CD pipelines, how do you build agents? You'll see open source stuff like Crew AI. So like Crew AI is probably 3, 4 years old, and it's in like half the Fortune 500 companies already. It's an open source kind of framework to allow you to kind of build agents. You're seeing a lot of verticalized agents out there. You see it a lot with some of the third-party providers, which we alluded to before. So you see stuff like Agentforce is one that's obviously from Salesforce is one that's very vocal. And so, and even I think MoveWorks, which I think Hunter kind of, talked to before, sitting on top of Purchase Buy and sitting on top of, what's it called? ServiceNow. You're going to start to see a lot more interactions through that. So I think it's real. I think some companies it's a little like fluffy, but I think it'll happen fast. And what's going to end up happening is once it does get some traction, it's going to explode because now you have kind of this B2B model, like business to business. You have a B2C model, like, business to obviously, to your clients. And then you're going to start seeing B to A being the agent, C to A to A, agents interacting with each other. And then that's going to spark the whole traditional infrastructure conversation around now, what is now know your client, right? So the whole IAM, like, identity and access management, that how now has to apply to agents. So you're going to have KYA, know your agent. And so there's going to be a ton of solutions that do that. So think about when I go to my Amazon Echo and I say, hey, can you please transfer, $1,000 to Hunter for me, or, send him a wire. Hopefully it's coming the other direction, but it is what it is. And how do I know that that's really Chase I'm dealing with versus somebody else? So I think there's going to be a huge, just like any of these new things, whether it was cloud and the control planes, whether it was kind of anything in the past, you're going to see all this infrastructure being built up to support agencies. And I do think people are going to adopt it. Some fast, some slow, getting back to that. Hey, do you want to be AI accelerated, or in this case, agent accelerated, or kind of agent steady, right?
Great stuff, John. Over to Joe P. Joe?
And then the last thing on that, and that's why, and then you have the whole implications of if these really are like people, how do you manage that? So that's the whole quote from Jensen Huang, like technology will become the HR of the future, because how do you deal with these things? You deal with bots kind of now a little bit, but this is even a little bit more powerful. Sorry, Joe.
No worries.
How you doing, John? Good to see you. Listen, I want to ask, what's your take on the talent pool with the potential brain drain in this country, misalignment of available staff? What do you see in the marketplace in terms of availability of the talent you need?
Yeah, I mean, so listen, it's not great, right? So if you look at and forget the brain drain and like, we got tariffs and I'm sure we might, if we have time, talk about some of that stuff. I think the reality is despite all that, there's a huge amount of jobs, about 3.5 million STEM jobs need to be filled every year. And so of that, you have the US only graduates, I think about 600,000 STEM people a year. And so it's obviously a big gap. And then you have India, and so that's pretty good. We can leverage some of that. I think I was seeing that Apple's now going to be generating all of its or manufacturing all of its iPhones or some portion of its iPhones in India versus China. But India is producing about 2.5 million STEM graduates a year, and then China about 4.7. So there's definitely going to be, there's definitely going to be challenges as it relates to hiring the right people for these types of jobs. And the reality is where in the past you would have kind of a scrum master and you would have an engineer and you might have like a DBA and project manager or business analyst. And okay, we've moved on to agile a little bit, which the roles are a little different. But then now you're going to have a data scientist, a machine learning engineer, and kind of some of these other roles. And so some of it is, yeah, you could hire all kind of brand new, But I think a lot of it is going to actually be around more mature organizations are going to have to like train themselves, right? So not to call out companies, but if I think about Accenture as an example, which is, 600, 800,000 people, I think it's up to 800,000 people, they had to retrain all their engineers to be kind of, cloud native. And then they spent a ton of money retraining all their people to kind of be AI native. And so if you think about an organization, I think the smart ones are investing in how do they actually kind of train their staff. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that, right? Some more formal, some others, right? So continuous learning and development and technology, and I'd say AI goes beyond technology, is critical to what we do. You can have coaches and mentors, definitely like having a culture that really promotes innovation and kind of continuous learning is going to be kind of key. But I think a lot of it's going to be really about explicitly taking the teams you have and trying to bring them up the curve, especially because there isn't a ton of attrition right now. Part of that was COVID. Part of that obviously is the economy. And so that's why you're starting to see, some layoffs and things happening, because you don't have that normal 10 to 15% attrition in the States that was happening for, as long as I've been in the industry. So.
Thanks for that, John. Hey, John, one more time, the title of the book, it's on Amazon. People can order it, right, and give it out for holidays or whatever gifts.
Man, that was a good plug. I like that. So it's AI Achieving Impact. You can type in John Napoli. I'm working on the audio version, but you can digital, hardcover, softcover. And if you bump into me in some of these things, I'm happy to sign it for you. But I got to say, it's been an amazing experience. It's a good learning experience, and that's a good example of learning by doing, which is, and I think AI is a great example of that. And I know you didn't ask the question, Hunter, but like all of you, as you go through your AI journey, whether that's for your company or for your personal use, go out there, like make a video for your kids with AI, make a song for your spouse with AI. Obviously, like use it for my kids I have a daughter who's a senior in high school, was deciding between two universities. I asked ChatGPT to compare the two. Yeah, I flew them out to California and Colorado to look at both. What I got from ChatGPT was almost exactly what they figured out. So I probably could have saved myself some money. So go out there and do things. The book was similar, great learning experience for me, kind of a fun thing, but I love learning by doing. So
great stuff. Hey, the final chapter of the book, you talk about future trends and what's next and how to be prepared. We got 1 minute. Give us a highlight of the final chapter of the book.
I mean, the biggest thing I would say immediately is really all around the agentic stuff. I think that's where you really, if you want to be like pragmatic, that's where you got to go. I tend to nerd out on some of the quantum stuff. I was lucky enough to work with a guy at JP, Marco Pistoia, who was running quantum for IBM, then kind of came over. The implications of that as kind of a next generation technology are huge. And I could also like credibly talk about things like quantum key distribution and post-quantum cryptography. So I like saying that to sound smart. But like really, so interestingly, there's some fun stats, like there's never been like a proper random number generated. So like there's all these kind of like approaches where you will take a picture of a bunch of lava lamps in a room and do some computation, generates a random number. Marco and his team, I think a couple of weeks ago, actually were the first people ever to generate a true random number by using quantum. But the implications of that especially when you pair it with AI, to technology are huge. The reality is most of our encryption will be breakable in the next few years by quantum. And what's happening now is harvest and decrypt, where people are collecting data now. And the reality is like how much are we really going to change our passwords and things 5 years from now when they are able to decrypt it. So I really like that space. But I say for AI specifically, agentic's it. There's a lot of other things like confidential computing and some other things, like how do you train models without actually seeing the data as part of that. But if I had to pick one, I'd say kind of agentic.
Hey, John, I think we'd all agree, everyone on the call, 75 plus people, great session. I look forward to following up with you. I'd like to invite you to become an HMG executive in residence. It's an incredible platform to get your thought leadership out on a global level with our global platform. But when you all agree, kind of wave to John. Thank you very much. Great stuff.
Be honored. Like your platform and being in your sessions has been fantastic. And so I appreciate the network you've helped me build and the friendship. And I've just learned so much. I did a post recently, if you check out my LinkedIn, on geopolitics and one of Hunter's existing kind of leaders just amazing stuff going on, and things I've learned through you and your network have been awesome. So thank you all for joining. That was really fast. I could talk about this for hours.
Join one of HMG's 300 plus upcoming digital and in-person experiences.